Shane Mosley using EPO. Way before TJ Dillashaw was Mr. EPO, Shane Mosley had his own story with it in 2003. Shane testified in front of a federal jury that, in 2003, he used EPO in his second fight with Oscar De La Hoya.
Did you know you were taking EPO, yes or no?
Yes.
EPO can increase an athlete's endurance, affecting the later part of a fight, often called the championship rounds. Mosley would win his fight by close decision. The testimony showed that he evaded the Las Vegas Commission's drug testing program and fooled millions of fans. He was an upstanding citizen, and a scandal of this nature forever ruined his "nice guy that hits hard" image.
And you knew it was EPO that day, correct?
Yeah, I guess. I knew it was something.
Luis Resto's gloves scandal. Undefeated Billy Collins was a junior middleweight prospect on his way up. Luis Resto was a light-punching journeyman. Resto beat Collins' eyes shut and his skin purple and blue. He suffered a torn iris and his vision was forever blurred. He could no longer fight. Collins' father/trainer went up to shake Resto's hand out of sportsmanship, only to be overcome with rage at how thin Resto's glove was. He demanded the gloves be impounded. Resto's padding had been removed, and he himself admitted years later that his hand wraps had been soaked in plaster of Paris, a substance that hardens into plaster casts. Collins began drinking and became violent without boxing in his life. He would later drive his car into a cement wall in 1984, ending his life at age 22. Resto and his trainer, Panama Lewis, were banned for life from the sport. He served 2.5 years in prison for assault, while boxing suffered a tragedy that shows just how dangerous cheating can be in this sport. Carlos Monson kills his wife by throwing her off a balcony. Carlos Monson was the greatest middleweight of all time. In 1977, Monson retired and managed to keep out of the papers. His previous violent relationships became the stuff that the paparazzi ate up. But in 1988, he entered the mainstream press again. This time, he not only beat his wife, Alicia Munoz, he picked her up by the neck and threw her off the second-floor balcony of their apartment. Monson was convicted of homicide and sentenced to 11 years. The boxer was allowed to visit his family in 1995 for a weekend, only to crash his car and die on the way back. Edwin Valero's murder or suicide. Edwin Valero was an exciting super featherweight and lightweight world champion. He was an animal in the ring, knocking out every single one of his 27 opponents, the first 18 within round 1. He was set to take the limelight away from the likes of Manny Pacquiao with his exciting style. Until he was arrested on suspicion of murdering his wife in April 2010. While in jail, Valero was found hanging from a bar in his cell with a noose made from his sweatpants. The exciting champion had committed suicide. Valero's Venezuelan family and friends were skeptical of Valero's death being suicide, suggesting the police had him murdered.
According to him, he didn't do it. They killed him.
Even the president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, suggested that Valero and his wife were killed by enemies of the state. Sonny Liston's mystery death. Sonny Liston was around 40 to 50 years old when he died in 1970. Liston, who was never sure what year he was born, was a talented boxer who went on to become the world heavyweight champion in 1962 after knocking out Floyd Patterson in the opening round. Liston, known for his 2 fights against Muhammad Ali, was found dead by his wife in their Las Vegas home.
Sonny Liston, the former heavyweight boxing champion, was found dead last night in his Las Vegas home by his wife. He had been dead for at least a week. An autopsy failed to show the cause of death, and further studies will be made. Police said that they found small quantities of what appeared to be heroin and marijuana in the home.
A coroner ruled Liston died of natural causes, but there have been many who had disputed that ruling. Liston had fallen into a life of drug and alcohol abuse, and in several documentaries about him, Liston repeatedly said he had feared for his life. It was more than 50 years ago when his wife Geraldine returned home from a trip, smelled a foul odor and found her husband unresponsive in his room upstairs.
And his head is back on the bed and canted to one side, and there's blood coming out of his nostrils and some kind of foam.
Several reports say Liston had fresh needle marks on his arms when he died. The coroner said he died from natural causes. Others have said he may have been murdered in some sort of mob killing. More than 50 years later, the mystery still remains. In 2013, there was a newly created book titled According to Warjack, Most Wanted, written by Greg Swain. The author claimed his late father Dale Klein helped kill Liston via a forced overdose. My father told me the story about Sonny's death. He was there when he was killed, along with others in the mob. He was very careful not to disclose too much to me. I assume he was worried about the pressure the mob may impose, using his children as a threat. Lee Murray's bank robbery. Murray was a middleweight out of London, England, who fought just once in UFC, back in 2004. He also took on Anderson Silva for the Cage Rage middleweight championship at one point. However, he is far better known for being the criminal mastermind behind the infamous Securitas Depot robbery. For those unfamiliar, the incident has the distinction of being the most lucrative cash robbery in recorded history. Murray and his accomplices made off with around $92 million. In order to pull the heist off, armed with assault rifles, Murray and company kidnapped the bank manager, while simultaneously holding his wife and 8-year-old son hostage. A few months later, in June 2006, the former Cage Rage title contender was apprehended in Morocco. Murray is currently in prison. Margarito's gloves. Prior to the 2009 Shane Mosley vs Antonio Margarito fight, Mosley's trainer Nazim Richardson was in the dressing room so he could observe his hands getting wrapped before putting on his boxing gloves. As Margarito's trainers were wrapping their fighters' hands, Richardson noticed what appeared to be a plaster of Paris powder on the wraps. The plaster of Paris hardens when it comes into contact with moisture, and any fighter will sweat during the course of a fight. As soon as Richardson saw the substance, he accused Margarito of fighting with loaded gloves. Margarito's hands were re-wrapped and Mosley hammered Margarito. However, in a previous fight, Margarito had been victorious against Miguel Cotto. By the end of the fight, Cotto's face was cut and bruised badly. When Cotto heard what had been discovered by Richardson, he accused Margarito of fighting with loaded gloves. He was suspended for a year. In a rematch with Cotto, he got battered.